Welcome to another Boilers Extra. This seat was reserved for Andy and Betsy, but I'm Nathan Baird from the Indianapolis Star.
I am neither Andy nor Betsy. I am Sam King from the Journal and Courier, but we're hours after Purdue's 101-60 win over Kent State. So I think Andy and Betsy are long gone, and we're going to kind of recap what happened. We don't need to go real deep into it, but conclusion of non-conference play, and I think that Purdue is trending in the right direction as Big Ten play resumes here on January 3rd.
You know, as Matt Painter pointed out after the game, Kent State's missing missing one important player. It's starting point guard. It's possibly its best player. One of its best players misses half the first half with 3 fouls. Purdue builds a huge halftime lead. But I think, I would agree with that sentiment that, coming out of the Iowa State game, it wasn't like this team was at a crisis, but you wanted to see what the response would be. And the response ever since then has been 4 straight opponents held to 60 or below. This would have been 3 out of 4 below 60, except some guy chucked in a 3 late for Kent State. I guess I want to start there. Just the defensive response that we've seen from this team. Matt Painter said, well, it's really only been the one bad half of defense, which against Iowa State, which I guess is correct. But I think if you're judging it by was this team playing championship level defense, I think it goes beyond that. And I think the Iowa State game was a wake up call. And Braden Smith saying as much. He tried to extend it out to like 6 or 8 games. But it's really these last 4, I would say, where you've seen a different level of team defense, a different level of connectedness, a different level of individual defense. I thought from early on in this game, you saw guys getting into guys. And it was kind of my question coming in was like, they had this momentum building on defense. You're playing on a Monday night against a team that on paper you're supposed to beat. And it's been a 9-day layoff. How are you going to respond? You had the Auburn game before. You're looking ahead potentially to the resumption of Big Ten play at Wisconsin on Saturday. So how can you come out with that can you keep that defensive edge? And I thought they did. Kent State hit some threes. Some of them are advantageous situations. One where they just got left wide open in the first half. But other than that, Purdue really controlled this game defensively.
Yeah, and it was a lot of guys just being kind of in the right place at the right time, too. There was one point where I think I turned to you and I said, he threw it right to Fletcher Lawyer. Well, Fletcher Lawyer was in the right place. He went in that passing lane and kind of sat there and was able to anticipate, hey, the ball's going to go here to the corner. And he threw it right to Lawyer, and it leads to a fast break. That's where Purdue really turned this game. I think it was 23-16, and Purdue scored the next 14 points in a span of like 3 minutes and 4 seconds and completely opened this game up. And really did it without blocking a lot of shots.
It was 0 shots.
Yeah.
They blocked 0 shots.
Okay. I did not know that.
Dana Jacobson was trying. He
fouled a couple guys.
He swatted a couple guys in the first half trying. But
it was a lot of steals. It was a lot of just good rotational defense. It was being where guys needed to be. There was one point where Trey Coughlin-Wren just ripped the ball away from a guy in the post, reached in and took the ball away from him. It was, and again, Kent State missing a point guard really probably limits what it would have done with him. But I think it was a great sign, given that Purdue hasn't played in 9 days, I think it is. And, been home for the holidays, all that stuff. And granted, you're at home, but it's not the same environment. The students aren't here, things like that. And I was, pretty impressed. You put up 101 points. You think you're talking about the offense, but I think the defense was equally, if not more, impressive.
There was a sequence in the first half where Fletcher Lawyer took a moving screen for a turnover, and then on the next trip down, Kent State finally got the ball in the post, and he came over to double the post, just took the ball away from the guy and headed the other way. And when you start seeing guys like that making as many defensive plays as he's been making the last few games, that is the difference between whether or not Purdue can win. Right. We'll just say, whether they can win a national championship or not probably depends on whether guys like that are making plays like that. It's a small margin for error when you're trying to win the whole dang thing. And that has been the standard we've been told by them to judge them by since day one. And, I've brought up multiple times that Ken Pom number. I think they're about 96 They've been around 96.5, 96.8, somewhere around there on the defensive efficiency. I don't know how much longer all of last year's the preseason data gets flushed out, but you've definitely seen the trend in the right direction in these last few weeks. And I think now it's a matter of the intensity picks up. I mean, it's a different physical toll that you're about to exert to go through Big Ten play. Wisconsin is 8-4 this year going into a game they have on Tuesday, but those 4 losses are all to pretty good teams. Like they've played a fairly tough non-conference schedule too. They're no slouches. Like, how do you answer that call? And now it's not going to be. There's never going to be another Kent State or Eastern Illinois or whatever on the schedule. And maybe I shouldn't even lump Kent State in with some of those teams, but considering who they were missing tonight, I think it's a little bit more apt. Man, go look at Kent State's non-conference schedule. I think they have a tough time finding opponents or something, because what was the one that we found? Penn State Saganta or something?
Senego or something?
My apologies to them, but they really have to stretch to find opponents sometimes. But it's going to be rugged, right? Like it's even at the bottom of the Big Ten, that's better than some of the mid-major teams that you're going to play. So. It's the biggest question at the start of this season, and I don't think Purdue has answered that question to a championship level yet, but they are trending where they want to get to, and they still have time to get there. They've still got a couple of months before you have to be playing that championship level defense when March comes around.
Yeah, now we've got to see it, and these next 3 months here, or at least 2 months going into postseason play, will be a lot more telling. I want to see Purdue play this style of defense when it's not in a game where it's shooting well and, blowing the team out of the water. Jack Benter, 7 for 7, 6 for 6 from 3 today. Just last week against Auburn, you get 11 combined threes from Benter, Harris, and CJ Cox. The game is a lot easier when the ball's going in for you. Purdue's going to have to, at some point, win a game 65-62, something like that. And it's going to have to be a defensive stop or, a series of defensive stops to come away with a win. So that's what we've yet to see, is a game that's competitive, probably since the Alabama game. That was in the 80s. Yeah, that was more of a high-scoring game that Purdue just had more points than the other team. So.
And no one's saying that in route to a championship, Purdue would clearly get on the floor with another team like Alabama and have to beat it 80-something to 80-something. Like that will be part of a championship run, to a Big Ten championship, to a Big Ten tournament championship, to how far they go in the NCAA tournament. Like that will be an element of that. But that other game, I think, will be in there too. When you play that many high-quality opponents for that long, you're going to have to find a way to – maybe it's the game that decides whether or not you win the Big Ten. It's just some random game in the middle there. You're playing Ohio State. You're playing Wisconsin, whoever. And it's not even a team that finishes at the top of the standings, but you find a way to get past them on a night when otherwise maybe you shouldn't. So that clearly is but that wasn't the issue tonight. Like very early on in this game, they were clicking offensively. Jack Benter, 14 of his 20 came in the second half. He was more of a caught the feeling in the second half and rode it. But you are seeing, I thought there was something that Braden Smith said that was instructive about where this team is offensively. And it was an answer to a question about defense, where he was saying that he, in particular, had maybe backed off of defense to help on offense more. And in addition to realizing that was counterproductive, he also said, well, we also are a different team now this year. And I think this is what he's talking about, that there is less of the load on his shoulders. This is not something new. This is something we've talked about at other points this season. But there's less load on everyone's shoulders. And I am noticing that it's happening more often that I'll look down at the box score and be like, oh man, that guy's got 15. And it's just hidden in with a bunch of other 15-point games.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the things he said was, I'm in a little playground out there, when he was talking about the offensive variety, because I said 2 years ago, you had this incredible college basketball cheat code where you could throw it to a 7'4" guy and he could score at will. You don't have that with this team. You have probably 9 guys capable of scoring 20 points on any given night. Tonight it was Jack Benter, who's the 6th player in 13 games to lead this team in scoring. I think that's an incredible sign of kind of how deep this team is. And it's not like they're out there running plays for Jack Benter or CJ Cox or Jakari Harris. Like Matt Painter said, those kind of have to come in the flow of the game and come organically. There's probably some set plays for Fletcher Lawyer. There's some for Trey Kaufman-Renn. Braden Smith creates for himself. But these other guys, you kind of just play by feel. And tonight, Jack Benter hits 2 threes in the first half during that 10-0 run. And then I think he just felt pretty good about it because the distance he let go from some of these threes kind of told you that he was feeling a little bit. So a little bit of ultimate heat checks on some of those. But I think there's, maybe that's why this team, I think, could be more dangerous than the team of 2 years ago, which, granted, could have won a national championship, was one win away from doing so. It's just because when you're game planning to play Purdue, we talk about Purdue's defense. Other teams, when they look at Purdue and their scouting, obviously you have to figure out a plan for Braden Smith. You've got to figure out something for Trey Kaufman-Renn, but beyond that, you've got to give up something. You've got to allow Lawyer to have good looks or CJ Cox to have good looks, and that's how they can really just kind of slice and dice you with so many different weapons because, it can be any guy, any one of these guys. Oscar Clough has led the team in scoring a couple times, was the leading scorer over like a 6-game stretch there for a while. And then, there's no 20-point scorer like last year with Trey Kaufman-Renn. And this goes back to what you were saying maybe a little bit about Braden Smith not having to carry the load. I think there's great balance, 9 guys that could score between 5 and 15 and really just they could put up a lot of points that way.
Well, and I also think, though, that the workload on some of these guys is advantageous for when you do need them to do that. When the next time you are on the court against Alabama, or you're on the court later this season against Michigan, Michigan State, Illinois, the other best teams in the Big Ten, like you are going to need those guys to score 20, 25 points usually to win those games. And maybe they have to play, Trey Kaufman-Renn has to play 36 minutes on a given night.
Last year, Braden Smith played 39 minutes, pretty much 39 to 40 minutes, pretty much every single game once we got to this point of the season going forward. And
we'll see how that shakes out during Big Ten play. I think that's a little bit to be seen.
Even if that's the case, with Omar Meyer being able to bring the ball up, you can do some different things where you're still not putting quite the stress on your point guard.
Tom Jones asks us, this is just keeping with what we just happen to be talking about here. We're a couple minutes behind looking at the comments, so maybe he's already had his question answered, but it seems that a deep bench is really a factor that continues to grow in importance because the total minutes played is less important than the productivity during the time on the court, which is, yes, exactly what we're talking about. I would always encourage people, no matter what sport you're looking at, look at the efficiency, look at the per minute stuff. If it's football, look at the per play or per carry or whatever. Don't look at the total numbers because you do learn a lot by who is being the most efficient with the time that they're out there on the floor. Jack Benter was very efficient tonight. But we were talking about this after the game too. Like so he's 7 for 7 tonight. And we were thinking, like, is this team going to set some sort of a record for most guys who had like a perfect X for X shooting performance? Because there was the game. Clough was 9 for 9 against Marquette just a couple of weeks ago. Daniel Jacobson didn't miss a shot for 3 weeks or whatever it was. They've had a few of these now, and they have other guys who are capable of it. It has not been a very efficient couple of games for Fletcher Lawyer, but he's always on a given night is the guy who could go 5 for 5 with 18 points because or 23 really, because 5 for 5 will be from the field with some threes, and then he'll hit all his free throws. And that's there on any given night for him. I mean, they have a bunch of those
shot
guys.
60+% for a season last year.
Yeah, no, exactly. And he hit a 3 tonight, by the way. Got the crowd excited early on. Everything that you thought was going to be a strength for this team. Like if we were just kind of give a concise wrap up of these 2 months, like they're exactly as potent offensively as we thought. No less than what we thought, maybe even a little bit better. I mean, we thought they'd be one of the most efficient offensive teams in the country. Braden Smith is who he is. Trey Kaufman-Renn is who he is. And rebounding, they've been everything they wanted to be and more, I would say. There's hardly anybody out there that you think is like a real threat to beat up on them on the boards. So it's really just the defense. Like that was really maybe the biggest X factor that was out there. The biggest unknown was how that would come together. And they're still just, building upon that. But I think they've closed December the right way.
Yeah, and people probably look at the Minnesota game and think, it's Minnesota at home. Minnesota has one of the best scorers in the country, and he was shut down by CJ Cox that day. So, that to me was kind of like maybe a sign of, okay, CJ Cox has kind of been an eraser for some of the best players on the opposing teams. here during this 4-game stretch. They've given him some tough assignments, and he's answered the call. But I thought that was probably a good sign. But granted, over these 4 games now, Purdue has been at home or at a neutral site, which is essentially a home game. Wisconsin's going to be a different story. It's a tough place to play. Purdue's had a lot of success at Wisconsin, but it doesn't mean it's ever been easy.
We should touch on what Matt Painter had to say after the game. He obviously, I would say about half of his press conference today was just being asked to comment on the general state of college basketball right now, especially the questions about professional players coming back for eligibility. He said something along the lines of, we don't know what's going on. Basically, and I tried to clarify that with him. Are you basically saying that you're finding out about who might or might not be eligible, or the class of player that might or might not be eligible by news reports after it comes out that that person is about to go play for some other team? And his answer was like, well, I don't swim in those waters, or something like that. Basically, like, they're not trying to find those guys right now. Like we already said, they were a very loaded team. They don't need to go get a mid-season replacement at really any position. They took care of that in the preseason. But his concerns basically still being that there is it's just a lack of stability, right? Like, it just feels like the ground is always moving beneath your feet. And I tend to look at things more from the player's perspective, but and not have all that much sympathy for coaches, frankly. But this is one instance where I think I understand where people are coming from. I don't think it's something that like is a crisis that threatens the future of the sport, but I do understand where you are trying to be the best coach for your players in all facets, and when you don't even know what the structure of the sport is right now, that can be a challenging position to then be able to follow through and be that for those players.
Yeah, and listen, like, I don't know the whole scenario. Like, maybe James Najee, who signed with Baylor, was announced last week and was a draft pick in the 2023 NBA draft, has never played in the NBA. He's been mostly in the Euro League, spent about 5 years over there. I don't know that he was looking to go to college. It's a possibility that somebody reached out to him and said, hey, have you considered that you've never played college basketball? You've never been in the NBA. I know you were drafted, but maybe there's some kind of grain of the lines there, or like blurring of the lines.
All these guys have agents.
Right.
There's got to be some agent out there who would say, hey, like, it doesn't say, the NCAA is losing every eligibility case that goes in front of it right now. And so why not find out if you can play? And right now, I think the NCAA is really just not even putting any resistance forward on a lot of these things. But at the same time, I think it's something that the NCAA or some consortium of the schools has to figure this out. Like Matt Painter again brought up, like, maybe there's got to be some sort of Congress or something. I think Congress has a billion things that are more important to deal with than this. You've got to be kidding me. Like, they have, I don't, and it's not me going after Matt. I understand where he's coming from and the frustration he feels, but every time a coach or AD brings that up, I'm like, really? There's like all the things that are wrong with this that need to be repaired in this country, and we're worried about whether coaches are inconvenienced right now.
He's right. There needs to be some sort of hard, fast, or like set series of rules that explain, so that these guys are not joining college rosters and everybody else is kind of blindsided. Like, I didn't even know that was allowed.
Everything that you're seeing right now is an overreaction. We tend to just overreact to things in this country. It's never like a very gentle, like subtle, oh, that thing happened? Well, we could just like slowly bend it and now it's perfect. No, it always has to swing one way or the other, it seems like. For generations, all of these rules were just imposed. Like, one class of people just imposed all these rules on another class of people. There was unlimited earning and movement over here. There was no earning and very limited movement over here with consequences. And once a court finally decided, well, that doesn't make any sense, and I would be one of the people who says it doesn't make any sense, then now the whole structure falls apart. You have to base the structure on something else. And the structure is going to have to be based on the players having a say in this, the players having representation, collective bargaining. I don't know how that's ever going to really. You're going to have to break football and basketball off probably to make this work. It's complicated. I'm not saying it isn't complicated, but I think the solution still has to come from within college sports. There's also, to an extent, some of this you can argue is there's degrees to it, right? Omer Meyer has been a professional basketball player for all intents and purposes, or playing at the professional level in Europe, and nobody bats an eye about the European guys coming over, although they've kind of started to bat an eye now that it's happening a lot. Right. When Matt Painter, when graduate transfers were first out there, Matt was pretty outspoken about the fact that it was what was intended to be an academic tool had been bastardized into free agency, and players jumping from mid-major up to high major level. This is before there was any NIL and anything involved. It was just a chance for them to jump up.
Rental player for 1 year, basically.
Yeah. But guess who brought in grad transfers? Matt Painter did, because he had to play at the same. Right. But that's a different thing, because that was a rule that, even if it was being manipulated, it was a rule that everyone agreed to and everyone knew. Everyone, there was more of a consensus about this. I think what the problem that he and other people are having right now is that, first it was Najee, and then now we're seeing the reports of the guy who has played in NBA games the last 2 years, right, now potentially trying to come back and play. The name is escaping me, but it's like it's just nonstop now. It's like, at what level does it stop? Does Kevin Garnett never played in college? Could he have finished his NBA career and then gone back and played?
Somebody today came up to me and said Carson Edwards has a year of eligibility left. Only played half a year with the Celtics technically. So like, if there's some sort of cutoff, like, you might see the wild west. And like the whole thing. No, I'm surprised I haven't seen it out there yet. And it's football related, but kind of in the same degree. I was thinking back to the Maurice Claret case and how that might all be different if that happened in present day time.
Oh no, a billion%. Well, what I was thinking of, and I tweeted about this the other day, it was like, do you remember when, and the rules on this had changed, so there was kind of a window where this was the case, but you could not work out for NBA teams and retain your eligibility. Right. Like if you went and worked out for an NBA team, if you thought, hey, I don't know where I stand exactly, I might be an NBA draft pick. I never thought about this, but like I might be an NBA draft pick. I need to like go get real feedback. Well, you always had to just rely on that sort of kind of 3 people removed scouting service thing that they put out. You couldn't just go to an NBA team, work out for them, and have them say yeah or no, or give you some real feedback. You couldn't go to the combine. It all had to be just this thing that you got in the mail, I think, essentially. And if you were to go even work out for an NBA team, you're done. You cannot play college sports anymore. And now you can go be drafted, go play for pro teams, and still come back and play. So to me, you can look at it one of 2 ways. You can be like, well, all the rules now, there's just no rules. Or you could say, boy, this really kind of puts into perspective how maybe those rules were BS back then. Like, why was the NCAA getting to restrict that to that extent? And the coaches maybe need to understand that some of what's happening now is a reaction to those really strict rules that were in place mostly just to benefit them, so that they knew what their roster was in April and didn't have to worry about whether a guy was going to come back or not.
Yeah. Now, I mean, based on how things have gone here with the Najee situation, though, there's no reason for a kid to not declare for the NBA draft. And if you don't get drafted, just go back to college. If you do get drafted, go play in the G League. And if you never make it to the NBA, go back to college. Like a lot of different variables. But this also, Matt Painter kind of talked about the trickle-down effect to the NAIA, Division III levels. This probably can affect high school kids getting recruited, because now if you can get a 21-year-old who's played 3 years of pro basketball versus a 17-year-old who's played 4 years of high school basketball, I think the decision is pretty easy, how you can fix your roster quicker.
At the end of this season, whenever that happens, we'll start writing stories about the offseason. One of the things we'll be writing about is probably Daniel Jacobson's professional aspirations and his prospects for that. And one of the things we would usually write in there is like, well, he can declare for the draft, but he just has to withdraw by this day. I don't know if it's worth putting that date in. Why would you put that date in? Withdraw from the draft. Why? Why would he withdraw from the draft? There's no reason to. I would stay in there, find out if you get drafted even in the second round, and you're someone like him who's as young as he is with the prospects he has, get drafted in the second round and be like, I'm good, and just go back. There are some other common sense ways to fix that side of things, where you could go to more of a hockey model where you can draft a guy and keep his rights for a certain amount of time, whatever. This, though, is very different, where you're just having guys kind of drop out of the sky. I don't know. The Carson Edwards thing is interesting, although he's probably making more money over there than he even could make.
He's doing pretty well for
here,
himself.
I would imagine. He's a pretty talented guy. Anything else?
I mean, just real quickly, I remember 3 years ago sitting there, and I had two separate Zach Edey stories written after his junior year. One of him coming back to Purdue, and one of him staying in the draft. And then as it got closer and closer to that deadline, and he didn't officially announce he was coming back to Purdue until right up against that deadline, but I got some good intel that he's going to come back to Purdue. That doesn't mean that the other story wasn't viable, because we made a last second switch. At least that was kind of prepared. But that's how far we've come in just 3 years. Is like he had a deadline, and if he decides after this timetable ends, he can't go back to school. So and just now 3 years later, theoretically he could have got drafted that year and played a couple years in the G League and come back to Purdue. As it turns out, he made the right decision. He came back to Purdue. He's done pretty well in the NBA despite the injury setbacks, but that's neither here nor there. That this kind of tells us how far we've come with where this has all gone in just a short period of time.
I mean, if you want to time travel in Purdue history, someone like Juwan Johnson comes to mind, who left college with eligibility, didn't play a lot in the pros, and or at least in the NBA, and then his pro career wasn't expansive, right? So, but at the end of whatever he was doing in the pros, or if you can imagine a time where
he's still playing pros, just his NBA career was
right. But you could imagine a time where he could have made more here than in the pros if he had come back. Like, then you just come right back and finish your eligibility. Like it is a little bit silly, but I also think that the NCAA's silly stance towards some of these things set them up for the situation we have now. So I don't know what fixes it. I do think it is interesting, though. Like, again, right now, why would Matt Painter be interested in bringing somebody in at the semester? Like, it doesn't make any sense. They've got plenty of guys. Now I'm jinxing somebody, but they're okay depth wise, pretty much everywhere. Now, a year from now,
he's done better than most college coaches, I think, at adapting to an ever changing series of rules. So,
right. And people have brought up the Baylor thing. Well, people forget that they did have their starting center get injured. I'm like, yeah, but that's part of the competition of college sports, is that a roster is built that accommodates, you're trying to build in depth, you're trying to build in contingencies, and the team that is more complete maybe goes farther and maybe is less vulnerable. And now you're going to just let people pick up street free agents at mid-season. Yeah, it's a mess. But I knew Matt would get asked about it tonight, and he ended up getting, I think, 3 questions about it, because everybody wants to know what he thinks, because he articulates these things pretty well, even on things that I don't necessarily agree with him on, and would push back on looking at it too much from just the coach's perspective. I still appreciate that he has thought these things through and has
it was a much different response to this than, say, Dan Hurley had. So who's a guy that this kind of goes off the rails, and it was the response I saw had some asterisks in it, which took the place of some swear words. So,
well, I think you can sense the frustration on Matt's part, because he's someone who has said, we are only going to do things based on these rules. If it costs us, so be it. Right. These are the rules. We're playing by the rules. We don't care what anybody else does. It's about integrity and dignity and all those things. And I don't think that's lip service. I respect that. And then when you keep finding out that you don't even know what the rules are, I understand his frustration, and it's not something that's going to get resolved this year. Um, you're probably going to see semesters don't start for a couple of weeks. Some places, and you're probably going to see some more guys get added around college basketball, and we'll see if Purdue runs in any of them between now and April.
I'm sure at some point, and it's quite possible. Like Louisville has a guy from the G League, for example. That could be a team you play in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament,
Yeah.
for example. So.
Absolutely. Well, that is all for us. It's the last you'll see of us until the new year. So happy New Year. Thanks to everyone who has followed us and joined us and keeps reading us. IndyStar.com, JCOnline.com. Follow, like, subscribe. All those things help us get this out to a wider audience. We will talk to you next from Madison on Saturday. Take care.